Then in your life, there comes a darkness. There's secret blocking out the sky.
So, this video was supposed to be a celebration for hitting 100 album reviews on Album of the Year, but if you look at that number, it's actually not 100. I lost so much motivation working on this video. So, this is not related to anything now. I don't know. Have me yapping about Radiohead. I don't like Pablo Honey very much. Out of the 3 songs that I remembered, 2 of them were positively. This album is just not very interesting. Outside of the first 2 tracks, there was hardly anything memorable compositionally or production-wise, which made it shockingly hard to stay focused while I was listening. While there weren't really any bad songs and a few had nice solos or riffs, it really just felt like a stripped-down version of everything the band would later become. Everyone knows Creep, and it's a really good song, but I was pleasantly surprised by You because I wasn't really expecting anything else on the track list to be of note at all. But You has a really strong vocal performance from Tom and some solid production to back it, so good job. The songwriting on the album is, well, there were a handful of moments that were genuinely pretty good. I mean, not by Radiohead standards, but still cool. I thought Prove Yourself had some strong moments for sure. I Can't Afford to Breathe in This Town, Nowhere to Sit Without a Gun in My Hand, Look Back Up to the Cathode Ray, I'm Better Off Dead. But most of the songwriting was pretty generic and at times comically incoherent. I actually enjoyed Anyone Can Play Guitar for its sheer and utter nonsense. I wanna be Jim Morrison. Here we are with our running and confusion, and I don't see no confusion anywhere. This might be the most confusing songwriting on any Radiohead song, but maybe that's the point. Maybe Anyone Can Play Guitar is secretly a lyrical masterpiece, and nobody has been able to replicate its genius. I don't know. The album's fine. Moving on. If this wasn't one of the coolest names in the Radiohead discography, I'd offer the more accurate title of Lotus Flower and Others. Okay, Codex is pretty good too, but the point is that most of this album is completely forgettable. Abstract and repetitive electronic is always going to be a hard style to pull off, but really the only memorable parts of this album are when it strays from that main idea. The first half of the album sticks pretty closely to that repetition, which makes for a consistent experience, if ultimately a boring one. Tom's vocals are much more sparing in the first couple tracks, when they really needed to be there to give the song some kind of direction or progression. By nature of their repetitiveness, they sort of end up feeling samey and static all the way through. The second half of the album really picks up in quality, but it sort of loses the direction and theming of the first half. Lotus Flower and Codex are hauntingly clean and vocally driven, a sharp contrast from the thick jungles of noise in the first half of the album. Give Up the Ghost is a bit empty, and Separator sort of falls back into the noisiness of the first half, but ultimately they're both good tracks and do enough interesting things to stay memorable. Lyrically, this album's also pretty strong, but it's definitely carried by Lotus Flower. All I Want is the Moon Upon a Stick, I Dance Around the Pit, The Darkness is Within, I Can't Kick Your Habit Just to Feed Your Fast Balloonin' Head, Listen to Your Heart. It's so good. While I can respect the experimentation, especially so late in their career, not only have other bands done experimental electronic better, but Radiohead has done experimental electronic better, and it really just doesn't hold up to the rest of their catalog. Okay, as a disclaimer, every single album from this point on in the list is fantastic. Radiohead is just the kind of band where their 7th best album could be another band's best album, and by quite a bit. So don't take any of the rankings from now on as like anything remotely negative, because every single album from this point forward is just insane. It's genuinely unbelievable that they made this as a follow-up to Pablo Honey, but I am so thankful they did. While it's still relatively easy listening compared to their other stuff, this is easy listening done right. The songs on the bends lead you in with a feel-good hook, and then they got you ascending by a minute 30. As an avid shower singer, this is probably the Radiohead album I have the most fun singing along to, because there aren't any big production gimmicks or crazy instrumentation. It's just good-ass rock, and whether it's the fun, upbeat stuff or the slower, prettier stuff they'd master down the line, everything on this album is a good time. That goes especially for the production, which gets significantly more memorable than Pablo Honey, if still 90s rock. The intro to Planet Telex is bizarre and intriguing. There are sick breakdowns in the title track and My Iron Lung. There are grungier noise rock influences on Bones and Just, all while being able to pull back and let Tom's voice shine on Fake Plastic Trees and Bulletproof. There's also a significant improvement from Pablo Honey in terms of songwriting and vocal delivery, but it's far from the best Radiohead can and would go on to do. There are some genuinely breathtaking moments, along some mildly petty and immature lines that sound straight out of Pablo Honey. Sometimes the album can feel a little samey, and a few of the songs are definitely messy, but neither of those are enough to stop me from having almost all of this album on my playlist. The biggest crime that the Bends commits is just being a Radiohead album, because this would be most other bands' magnum opus, but it kind of pales in comparison to the rest of their catalog. Overall, though, this album absolutely slaps, and the fact that it slaps this hard at number 7 is a testament to how good this band is overall. This is the first album on the list to get a 90 from me, and the first to show Radiohead's real skill when it comes to electronic. Unlike King of Limbs, when this album switches up, it feels focused and intentional, and oh boy does it switch up. This is definitely up there as one of Radiohead's most dynamic track lists with the sheer amount of sounds it covers. Don't get it confused though, this album is still infinitely more focused and directed than King of Limbs is. The songs have a consistent somberness to them that the band really explores to its fullest. Whether it's minimalist and heart-wrenching on Pyramid Song or blunt and aggressive on Knives Out, this album's gonna find a new way to make you sad, and I think that's so cool. That doesn't sound right. This album has some of Tom's most experimental vocal performances, and they basically all hit for me. Polk Pull Revolving Doors and Like Spinning Plates both sound like he's getting cut up in different ways, and no, that doesn't make any sense. Please shut up. Packed Like Sardines has an infectious groove to his vocals, and my personal favorite from the album, You and Whose Army, has him drenched in layers and layers of reverb that make for a really ghostly build-up to this amazing release of energy at the end of the song. Tom's lyricism also just doesn't miss on this album, but the highlight is definitely Pyramid Song. I jumped in the river, what did I see? Black-eyed angels swam with me. A moon full of stars and astral cards, and all the figures I used to see. If the Bends was about human problems, then this is what gods cry to, like holy shit. The production on this album is its greatest strength and its biggest weakness, creating some of the coolest and most unique sounds Radiohead has ever come up with, and also a whole lot of empty. I know a lot of people like Knives Out, but it has shockingly little to offer in the context of this album. When you have Life in a Glass House going on insane jazz breakdowns in the background, and Like Spinning Plates making Getting Blown Away in the Wind sound musical, Knives Out is probably the closest this album gets to being generic. Even in more traditional rock production, I think I Might Be Wrong is just more interesting. Any gripes aside, it's confounding that an album this good is at number 6 on this list. And I just want to highlight that everything past this point is spectacular, because I think my next pick might ruffle some feathers.
This is what you get when you mess with us.
Here it is, considered by many to be their best work and considered by me to be quite literally middle of the road. OK Computer is the first Radiohead album to really break new ground in the rock scene. Where you could probably hear Pablo Honey and the Bends come out of a few different bands, OK Computer is the first distinctly Radiohead studio album, and they really went all out. I'm sure a big part of the change can be attributed to the full switch to Nigel Godrich, producer, legend, and longtime Radiohead collaborator, but the band clearly had big ideas going into this album, and they did not disappoint. Many have heralded this album for its prophetic lyrics, saying that they predicted the future, and while a lot of the lyrics hit pretty hard today, I think lyricism is far from this album's best quality. While it has undeniable lyrical bangers like Paranoid Android, there were a few songs that were either mid or kinda corny. Radiohead's best songwriting lives in its subtlety, so hearing Electioneering tell me, hey, did you know that elections aren't 100% sincere? Or Fit or Happier saying, hey, isn't it bad that we're becoming more robotic? Came off a bit oversimplistic, especially next to tracks like Airbag that have a lot more nuance when it comes to the subject matter. Production-wise, it's incredible. Leaning all the way into the noise rock they were dipping their toes in with the Bends, Radiohead goes all out with noise here, and it makes for a really memorable sound in the Radiohead discography. While they draw some 90s grunge inspiration from Nirvana and the Smashing Pumpkins, the album has an equally important electronic element to it that would guide the band's next couple albums, taking inspiration from progressive electronic and IDM bands like Aphex Twin or even Kraftwerk. Paranoid Android has these huge winding phrases of what I can only describe as computer noises that give the album a really specific and defined identity. Unfortunately, not every song on the track list leans into that identity, and a few come out a bit substandard, at least by the incredibly high bar the album set for itself. This also happens to be the first album on this list that I consider to have a perfect song. Exit music for a film is breathtaking. There's really no other word for it. I don't care that it doesn't perfectly fit with the rest of the album because it's genuinely some of the best music Radiohead's ever made, and it's what I think of when I hear OK Computer brought up. I imagine there are some comments being typed out right now about Hail to the Thief above OK Computer, but you're gonna click on a video very transparently about my opinions and tell me that I'm wrong? Wow, kinda toxic. I went into this album with fairly low expectations. I think generally it's considered pretty mid by Radiohead standards, but as I kept listening and waiting for that drop off in quality, it just never happened. Hail to the Thief is a breath of fresh air, not in the sense that it's better than the two albums that came before it, but in the sense that it's Radiohead coming back to good old rock after their brief departure into electronic. And what a comeback it is. No more crazy vocal effects, no more random computer noises, no more Polk pull revolving doors. Just a handful of guitars, a piano, and a dream. Whether the delivery is calm or aggressive, this album has Tom at his angriest, and the songwriting flourishes as a result. The whole album is narratively grounded in a frustration with the Iraq War, but even without that context, there are so many songs that still hold up. 2 + 2 = 5 has some of Tom's rawest vocal performances in the entire Radiohead catalog to the absolute bar that is... But the tracklist just keeps on giving. The haunting beauty of Sail to the Moon and Where I End and You Begin. The driving aggression of Go to Sleep and Myxomatosis. Whatever the fuck is happening in A Wolf at the Door. Slaps you in the head, knives you in the neck, kicks you in the teeth, takes out your credit cards, dance you fucker, dance you fucker. Where I would probably criticize pettier songs like A Punch Up at a Wedding on another Radiohead album. In this context specifically, it fits into the energy of the record so well that I don't really mind all that much. While it's not as interesting or dynamic as OK Computer production-wise, you give Radiohead a piano and they're gonna do something amazing with it. This album honestly feels like the Bends grew up, and that album already had amazing production, so adding slow piano tracks to the mix is just gonna make things better. One thing I can say that the Bends does better than Hail to the Thief is that a lot of the tracks here really blend together. It could be the 14-song runtime or just being less accessible in general. Probably both, but there are a handful of tracks that sort of just pass by, even if I do enjoy them. Also, completely unrelated to anything, this is definitely my favorite name for a Radiohead album, so it gets bonus points there. Anyway, moving on. I think ever so slightly more than OK Computer. This is probably the fan favorite. I'd bet that In Rainbows is making the #1 spot on more lists than any other Radiohead album. And yeah, it's deserved. If I was making a list of the best Radiohead albums instead of my favorites, this would probably be #1 too. But alas, I enjoy others more for personal reasons. This time I'm gonna start off with the perfect songs on this album, because yes, there are two, and yes, I want to ruin the pacing of this video to yap about some absolute bangers. Weird Fishes. How do you have not one, but two of the biggest in-track switch-ups of all time in the same song? And they both have me crying. The way this song builds up all these winding guitar tracks, cuts them all off at once, brings in basically a completely different instrumental, and makes it all work together needs to be studied. I think there's a solid argument for being the best line Tom has ever delivered. Will I make that argument? No. But it's up there. Jigsaw falling into place. Every time you think the song is at the good part, it just gets better. It's devastating, fun, concerning, the saddest song you've ever heard about a party. I don't even know. You really just have to listen to it. The rest of the album is like 50% really good and 50% decent. I know a lot of people really like Body Snatchers, but I think 15 Step does the high energy better and more experimentally. I can say the same thing about Nude and Videotape for low energy songs. All I Need and Reckoner do a better job of adding to the Radiohead sound, which is what I feel this album is really all about, expanding their sonic palette. Faust Arp and House of Cards really didn't do that much for me, but they definitely didn't take away from the album. The highs of this album are so high, and while there are moments that don't quite reach that bar, the album as a whole is truly remarkable and practically inseparable from the band's identity. Amazing stuff. Take everything I just said about In Rainbows and multiply it by 10. This album literally has my two favorite songs in the Radiohead discography, and I only have half of it saved to my playlist. Coming off of OK Computer, the band had already jumped the shark. The only way they could release anything afterwards and have it not be instantly insignificant in comparison would be if they released an album so strange and avant-garde that it shattered any expectations you could possibly have for the band moving forward. So they did that. Kid A is such an anomaly. There are a handful of songs that do literally nothing for me. Some are downright boring, and it's still #2 on this list. To get across this range of quality I'm talking about, I'm gonna talk about the tracks roughly from worst to best, but don't take any specific placements too seriously. I don't like Tree Fingers. I think there are much better ambient works in that style, especially since the turn of the century, and it just doesn't feel particularly Radiohead to me. Optimistic and In Limbo were really repetitive and didn't click with me. Morning Bell was done better on Amnesiac. The title track is actually pretty good, but it doesn't really compare to the rest of the album. And now that I've talked about the tracks that aren't special, here are the ones that are. The National Anthem. If you liked Life in a Glass House from Amnesiac, this is like that on crack. There are these layers upon layers of brass and synths, all doing their own thing over this really solid bass line, and it makes for a truly unique Radiohead track experience. Idiotech is Radiohead IDM done right. It has these sharp, repetitive drums on the surface, but there are these larger-than-life synths in the back that add a soft melodic element and break things up in a really pretty way. I also love Tom's voice on this track. It's never too much, but you can definitely feel him holding back some kind of desperation, especially on lines like, "This is really And now for the truly great songs. How to Disappear Completely. While it isn't my favorite from the album, this has gotta be up there in the most emotional Radiohead songs of all time. Starting out soft and slow and building up into this stormy emotional climax, the progression on this track is immaculate, carried even higher by Tom's all-out vocal performance. The thing about the next two songs is that they aren't just my favorite songs on this album, they are literally my two favorite Radiohead songs. So consider this a bonus list just for you. I didn't listen to music that much for a long time. It was only really a couple years ago when I started going out of my way to listen to music. So before then, I was subject solely to the whims of the radio and my dad's playlist. There was one song he listened to that really stood out to me as great, but I didn't care enough about music generally to ask him about it, so I kind of just forgot it and moved on with my life. But when I finally sat down to listen to this album in full, 5 Notes took me all the way back to my childhood. Everything in its right place is everything great about electronic, about Kid A, about Radiohead. I could go on and on about all the little vocal snippets, background noises, composition, whatever, but you really just need to listen to it to understand. I don't have some kind of backstory with this next one, some special personal reason why it's my favorite Radiohead song. I just like how it sounds, which is a little ironic for a band with so much deeper meaning and context behind every decision they make. But I think at the end of the day, it's really cool that there's no barrier of entry for loving music, even if you are really into it. Motion picture soundtrack is like the opposite of everything Kid A. Its instrumentation is soft and drumless, its progression is more standard and logical, and it's slow. Not that there aren't other slow songs on the album, but this one does it in a really specific way that's hard to describe. When I said Weird Fishes could be argued to have Tom's best vocal performance, this is the song I actually think has it. Every line digs into my soul like knives, and it ends with my favorite line ever performed by the band.
I will see you in the next life.
Oh wait, this is a video about every Radiohead album. Strangely enough, this is the first Radiohead album I listened to in full. I'd heard a lot of their stuff before and had a handful of their songs on my playlist, but when I started listening to their full albums, I chose to try this one first. Everybody loves their Kid A's and In Rainbows and OK Computers, but this one felt distinctly mine as a favorite. Regardless of any bias, I like listening to this album more than anything else the band has put out, and it's definitely my favorite Radiohead album. I never knew I needed Radiohead chamber pop this much, but of course they're gonna be good at it. They're good at everything. It's nothing short of amazing that almost 20 years after OK Computer, they're still reinventing their sound every time they drop an album. A Moon-Shaped Pool takes the iconic Radiohead art rock and brings in strings. A lot of strings. And it works so well. Being one of the softest and most accessible Radiohead albums, the instrumentation does so much in keeping things interesting and unique. A lot of the time, they're really nice compliments to Tom's vocals, but every once in a while they hit you with this insane string solo that gets you ascending like... Where I think this album really shines, though, is the lyricism and the vocals. Being so accessible, you wouldn't expect the sheer range of performances Tom gives, but he gives them and they're all great. This album easily has my favorite songwriting the band's ever done. A 10-ton head made of wet sand, This Dread Circumference, You Gotta Be Kidding Me, Grass Grows Over Me, This Is a Roundup, This Is a Low-Flying Panic Attack, and You May Pour Us Away Like Soup, Like We're Pretty Broken Flowers, We'll Take Back What Is Ours. But even more than the lyrics themselves, this album has Tom's best line delivery, and there are so many songs you just need to hear to get.
I feel this love
And you really can't can't go this long talking about the album without mentioning True Love Waits. Made long before the rest of the album was in production, it really feels like the perfect ending not only to the album, but to the story of a classic Radiohead track. On a personal level, I have a hard time deciphering why exactly this album is my favorite, but I think, like Motion Picture Soundtrack, I just like how it sounds, and that's honestly enough. I didn't make this list or start reviewing albums or making content to change people's minds about things. I just started this because I like showing people things I enjoy. So you know what? This album's my favorite because fuck you. Okay. It's hard being a Radiohead fan right now. With Tom and Johnny's shift towards Zionism, it's been so weird getting my head around the idea that these people I have so much respect for are pushing out ideas that are actively harming people. Recently, I saw a YouTube video where this guy showed off their OK Computer vinyl, and I cringed. I have 4 Radiohead vinyls, and I cringed. It sucks that I can't be fully proud of being a Radiohead fan. It sucks that I have to end this video saying, hey guys, I'm not a Zionist. It sucks that I feel guilty when financially supporting one of my favorite bands of all time. But I do think there is something to be learned here. When it comes to any celebrity, especially talented artists, it's really easy to imagine that they're good people. When art makes a significant positive impact on our lives, we tend to project that positivity onto the artist, like it was them who helped us through a rough time in our lives, or emotionally resonated with us on a personal level. At the end of the day though, we don't know these people. While I get the impression that Tom York is an out-of-touch rich guy that puts a little bit too much importance on his own opinions, he probably isn't actually pro-genocide. Usually people that do or say bad things aren't cartoon supervillains. But assuming he's a perfect person because you like his music is equally silly in my opinion. Does any of this mean you can't listen to Radiohead? No. Does it mean you can't financially support them? Also no. But should you stay informed and have a grounded understanding of the faults of artists you like? Yeah, I think so. Well, there's an argument for boycotting an artist until they clearly apologize or state a change in beliefs. I don't think it's the fans' responsibility to change who the artist is. I think until Radiohead releases the I Love Israel album, being consciously skeptical of their shortcomings is enough. Maybe in like a year I'll drop the Godspeed You Black Emperor worst to best, and we can all wave around our Palestine flags and sip our matcha lattes and giggle and be queer. Why did I write that?